A city's survival rests on the shoulders of its gate watch. These men were more than just guards in armor. They were human filters, tax collectors, and spies, standing between safety and chaos. By the end of this, you will know the untold secrets of their daily fight for survival. How did they spot a liar in a crowd of thousands? What whispered deals were made in the shadow of the portcullis? The truth behind the medieval gate watch is stranger than any fantasy. What part of a guard's hidden life are you most curious to discover? The man standing watch at the city gate was rarely a simple soldier. He was a complex figure, a product of his station and his city's needs. Many were younger sons of knights or minor nobles, men who inherited a name but no land, finding a respectable and steady income in the watch. Alongside them stood grizzled veterans, soldiers who had survived foreign campaigns and now traded the chaos of the battlefield for the constant vigilance of the gatehouse. Then there were the conscripted townsfolk, ordinary craftsmen or merchants required by law to serve their turn, their eyes sharp for familiar faces but perhaps less keen on the nuances of a stranger's story. This was not a uniform army but a patchwork of lives, each man bringing his own history to the cold stone archway. Age and experience varied dramatically depending on which gate you were assigned. The main city gate, the grand entrance facing the trade roads, was a posting for the most reliable and observant men. Here you would find the seasoned professionals, the captains who could spot a nervous twitch in a merchant's smile or hear the false note in a pilgrim's tale. But at a smaller postern gate, tucked away in a quiet corner of the wall, the watch might be a single older veteran content with a solitary duty, or even a young, inexperienced recruit learning the ropes far from the overwhelming crowds. The gate itself defined the watchman's day, from the frantic, high-stakes scrutiny of the main thoroughfare to the tedious, lonely hours at a forgotten portal. Consider the sheer range of people a single guard had to assess. One moment he was checking the cargo of a wealthy cloth merchant, the next he was questioning a traveling friar, and then he was turning away a rowdy group of pilgrims. He needed the social awareness to not offend a powerful noble, the street smarts to detect a clever con artist, and the physical presence to deter a common brawler. His duty was a constant performance, a balancing act between courtesy and suspicion. How did a man learn to read such a diverse and endless stream of humanity? The answer lies not in a manual, but in the secret language of the city itself, a code spoken in glances, gestures, and the subtle details of a traveler's appearance. The deep, resonant bell of the Citadel Tower shattered the pre-dawn stillness. For the men of the gate watch, this was the muster call, a sound that pulled them from their pallets and into the cold, dark streets. They gathered in the gatehouse yard, a shadowy assembly yawning and stamping their feet against the chill. Under the flickering light of a torch, a sergeant inspected each man. He checked the links of their chainmail, tested the edge of their blades, and ensured their helmets sat straight. This was not a ceremony, it was a vital necessity. A single rusty buckle or a loose spearhead could mean the difference between life and death when the crowds began to press. As the first sliver of sun broke the horizon, the great iron portcullis groaned upwards, and the day's true test began. The initial trickle of traffic quickly swelled into a relentless river of humanity. A shepherd prodding his bleating flock toward market created a chaotic, woolly dam. A wealthy merchant's wagon, laden with spices from the east, filled the air with the scent of cinnamon and pepper, a stark contrast to the ever-present smell of sweat, animals, and mud. The guard's senses were under constant assault. His ears rang with the cacophony of cartwheels on cobblestones, the barking of dogs, and the pleas and protests of 1,000 different voices. His eyes constantly scanned, searching for the nervous hand, the shifty glance, the poorly told story. This was a special kind of exhaustion, a mental drain that settled deep into the bones. Standing in one place for hours on end, armor growing heavier with each passing moment, required a fortitude that mere sleep could not cure. Monotony was the true enemy. The same questions, the same inspections, the same arguments over tolls and taxes, repeated for what felt like 1,000 times. A guard's mind could grow numb, lulled by the rhythmic flow of ordinary life. But that numbness was a trap. The moment a guard let his focus slip was the very moment danger would choose to arrive. A sudden scuffle in the line, a cart that seemed just a little too light for its claimed cargo, a traveler whose eyes darted too quickly toward the murder holes in the gatehouse ceiling. These were the sparks that snapped a man back to full alert. His heart would hammer, his hand would tighten on his spear, and the tedious day would vanish in an instant, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of a potential crisis. How could a man maintain such vigilance when his body begged for rest and his mind craved escape? The answer was etched into the very stones he guarded, a silent pact between the watch and the sleeping city behind them. A guard's authority was etched into the very tools he carried, while the sword at his hip was the final argument. His daily survival relied on a far more nuanced arsenal. The poleaxe was a masterwork of controlled force, a long wooden shaft topped with a brutal combination of axe blade, hammerhead, and a wicked spike. In the tight confines of the gate passage, a swinging sword was useless and dangerous, likely to strike an innocent bystander, but the poleaxe could be used to block, to shove, to hook a leg, or to deliver a non-lethal stunning blow with its hammer face. It was the perfect tool for crowd control, allowing a single watchman to create a barrier of disciplined power between the orderly line and potential chaos. Then there were the weighted nets, a tool far more sophisticated than it first appeared. Tossed with skill, a net could entangle a single violent individual, wrapping them in heavy cords and lead weights, bringing them to the ground without drawing a single drop of blood. This was crucial for dealing with drunkards, brawlers, or even a suspect they needed alive for questioning. It was a weapon of capture, not killing, reflecting the watch's complex role as both enforcer and peacekeeper. Beyond weapons of metal and rope were the powerful symbols of office. The great iron keys that unlocked the city gates were objects of immense significance. They were often a foot long, heavily forged, and sometimes intricately decorated. They were not carried lightly on a belt, but presented and turned with ceremony. Possessing the key meant you held the life of the city in your hands, each dawn and each dusk. Its weight was a constant reminder of the trust placed in the watch. And then came the humble, utterly vital tools that never feature in songs or stories. The lantern with its precious candle pierced the deep gloom of the gatehouse interior and the pitch-black hours of the night watch. The hourglass, meticulously turned, marked the long, wearying stretches of a guard's duty, ensuring shifts changed on time and no post was left unattended. Most telling of all was the wax tablet. This small wooden frame filled with soft wax paired with a stylus was the watch's memory. On its surface, a guard could scrawl a description of a suspicious character, note a merchant's unusual cargo, or record the license of a particular wagon. He would then smooth the wax clean, ready for the next important notation. This simple device for temporary record keeping was as essential as any blade, for it transformed a vague suspicion into a tangible report that could be passed to the day watch or up the chain of command. The true measure of a gate watchman was not just his strength, but his ability to wield this entire collection, from the crushing power of the poleaxe to the delicate point of the stylus. That simple wax tablet was the key to a far more complex art, the subtle science of reading people. Every guard, through sheer repetition, became a master of human observation, a living lie detector long before such a concept had a name. Their tools were not machines, but their own five senses, honed by thousands of daily interactions. They profiled not by prejudice, but by a deep, practical understanding of how an honest person behaves versus someone with something to hide. A merchant who could not meet the guard's steady gaze, whose eyes darted toward the city walls as he told his story of a simple cloth shipment, was immediately marked for a more thorough inspection. His nervousness was a louder alarm than any bell. Speech patterns told their own tale. A person rehearsing a false identity might stumble over simple details, like the name of the village they supposedly came from or the saint's day they were traveling to celebrate. Their story would be too perfect, too smooth, or conversely, filled with contradictory holes. The watch listened for the tremor in a voice, the slight hesitation before answering a routine question. Even the tone was a clue. A voice that was too loud and boisterous could be a performance to mask fear, while one that was a whispered mumble often hid a secret. Clothing and possessions were a walking autobiography if you knew how to read it. A man claiming to be a poor pilgrim, begging for alms, would raise suspicion if his boots were finely made and startlingly clean, showing no wear from the long, dusty road. His hands might be soft and uncalloused, the hands of a scholar or a scribe, not a devout traveler. The contents of a cart were another open book. A farmer's wagon supposedly carrying only hay might sit suspiciously high on its axles, its wheels digging deep into the mud, suggesting a much heavier, hidden load beneath the straw. A bundle that was clearly the shape of crossed swords, wrapped in rough cloth and labeled as tools, would not escape a veteran guard's notice. The most dangerous individuals were not the obvious ruffians, but those who tried too hard to be invisible, blending into the crowd so perfectly that they stood out to a trained eye. They moved with the flow of traffic, but their shoulders were tense, their steps too measured. They avoided looking at the guards altogether, a behavior just as telling as a nervous stare. In a world without databases or wanted posters, the Gate Watch's greatest weapon was this ingrained, intuitive profiling, a silent conversation held in the space between a question and an answer. The gatehouse was far more than a simple arch in the wall. It was a deadly, self-contained fortress. Picture yourself stepping through the main entrance, passing under the first of two heavy iron portcullises. Even if an enemy force broke through the outer gate, they would find themselves trapped in this stone cage. The inner portcullis slammed down behind them. High above in the vaulted ceiling of the passage were the murder holes. These ominous openings were not for dropping stones, as many believed, but for pouring down boiling water, hot sand, or quicklime onto anyone trapped below. A single guard with a bucket could inflict horrific casualties without ever facing his enemy directly. This killing ground was the heart of the gatehouse's grim purpose. Above this chaos, a network of wooden stairs and narrow landings connected the different levels of the stronghold. The main guard chamber was often directly over the gate passage, a large room where men off duty could sleep on simple straw pallets, mend their gear, or share a hot meal cooked in the great fireplace. The air in here would have been thick with the smells of wood smoke, stew, and the sweat of hard-working men. In a small alcove, sometimes barely larger than a closet, was the gatehouse chapel. Here a guard could offer a quick, silent prayer before his watch, seeking protection for the long, dark hours ahead. It was a stark reminder that every shift could be his last. But the gatehouse had one more secret, hidden down a steep, damp stairwell in the foundations. Below the level of the busy street, carved into the cold earth and stone, were the prison cells. These were not dungeons for long sentences, but holding pens for the trouble of the day. A drunkard sleeping off his ale, a pickpocket caught in the crowd, or a merchant caught lying about his goods would be thrown into one of these dark, airless spaces. They would wait there, listening to the muffled sounds of the city carrying on above them, until the magistrate arrived for his morning court. The gatehouse was a vertical world, a microcosm of medieval justice, holding everything from prayer and daily bread to capture and punishment, all within its formidable walls. Each entry in that wax tablet was a single thread in a vast, invisible ledger of lives. The Gate Watch were not just observers, they were medieval data analysts, their scratchy notes forming a living census of the city's pulse. Every person, every cart, every sack of grain was documented. A merchant from Florence was not just a man in a fine cloak, he was a line in a book. His name, his city of origin, his stated business, and the value of the silk in his wagon were all carefully recorded by a guard using his stylus. This was not simple curiosity, it was the foundation of the city's economy. These logs were the primary tool for tax collection. When that merchant sold his silk, the tax officials would cross-reference his gate entry record with his sales, ensuring the city received its due share of the customs duties. A guard's accurate hand could fill the city's coffers, while a careless one could let a fortune slip through the gates untaxed. But these records served a purpose far beyond mere coin. In an age of plagues, the ledger became a lifeline. If a deadly sickness broke out in a neighboring town, the watch could be ordered to check their logs and turn away anyone from that infected area. If illness struck within the city walls, officials could trace the outbreak's path by following the ledger's entries, seeing who had arrived from where and when. This rudimentary contact tracing could save thousands of lives, turning a simple list of names into a powerful shield against invisible invaders. The records were also instrumental in solving crimes. If a nobleman's house was robbed, the watch could scour the logs from that day, looking for anyone who entered with no clear business or who left the city in a suspicious hurry shortly after the theft. A name, a description, a point of origin, all captured on wax and later transcribed to parchment, could provide the crucial lead that city constables needed. This constant, meticulous logging transformed the chaotic flow of humanity into structured, usable information. The true power of the Gatewatch lay not only in their strength to stop a single criminal, but in their collective memory to track the movements of an entire population. What other secrets might those forgotten pages have held, chronicling the comings and goings of a world long since past? Every coin collected at the gate was a small piece of the city's survival. The Gatewatch were the frontline tax collectors in a complex economic system, their eyes constantly evaluating the river of goods flowing into the city. A merchant's wagon was not just a vehicle, it was a potential treasury on wheels, and the guard had to calculate its worth on the spot. Common goods like wool, wine, and salt were heavily taxed, as they were essential commodities that generated steady revenue for the city lord or the crown. The guard's first task was to identify the merchandise, then assess its quantity and quality. A cart laden with coarse, unfinished wool from local sheep was taxed at a far lower rate than one carrying fine, dyed woolens from Flanders. A barrel of common table wine was one thing, but a cask of spiced wine from the Mediterranean was another, its value and thus its toll significantly higher. This required a guard to possess a working knowledge of trade goods, their origins, and their market value. He was part accountant, part appraiser, making rapid calculations that affected both the merchant's profit and the city's wealth. To avoid paying the full toll, merchants became masters of deception. One of the oldest tricks was false labeling. A merchant might claim his barrels contained cheap salted fish, a low tax item, when in reality they held expensive spices or even weapons, which carried a much higher duty. The only way to catch this was a physical inspection, using an auger to drill a small hole in the barrel and sample the contents. Another common ruse was the hidden compartment. A wagon might have a false bottom, creating a secret space beneath the legitimate cargo where untaxed silk or silver could be smuggled. A watchman learned to judge the weight of a wagon by the depth its wheels sank into the mud, and a cart that seemed too heavy for its declared load was always pulled aside for a thorough dismantling. Some merchants would even bribe the guards, offering a single silver coin to look the other way, a temptation that was a constant test of a watchman's integrity. This is where the watchman's dual role as enforcer became critical. A merchant caught cheating faced severe penalties, from the confiscation of his entire cargo to imprisonment in the gatehouse cells below. The financial stakes were high for everyone involved, and a guard's pay was often directly tied to the taxes he collected. Many watchmen received a portion of the tolls as part of their wages, a share system that made them fiercely motivated to be thorough and honest. Their personal livelihood depended on the city's prosperity, creating a powerful incentive to catch every trick and collect every last coin. This intricate dance of appraisal and enforcement at the city gate was what funded the walls they stood upon and the peace they were sworn to protect. The city gates may have closed at dusk, but the watch's duty only grew more intense. The night shift was a world apart from the day's chaotic commerce, a realm of shadows and whispers where every sense was strained to its limit. The familiar cacophony of carts and crowds vanished, replaced by an unsettling silence broken only by the scuttling of rats, the distant bark of a dog, or the sigh of the wind through the battlements. In this profound quiet, a single footstep on cobblestones could sound like a thunderclap, and the rustle of a cloak in a nearby alley demanded immediate investigation. A guard's vision was reduced to the small, swaying island of light cast by his lantern, a feeble shield against the oppressive blackness that pressed in from all sides. He learned to see not with his eyes, but with his ears, identifying the normal night sounds of the city so that any abnormality would trigger an instant alarm. The protocol for challenging someone in the darkness was a matter of life and death. You never simply called out, "Who goes there?" A shouted question gave away your position and offered no protection. Instead, the challenge was a ritual. A guard would stand firm in the shadows just beyond his lantern light, his poleaxe held ready, and demand in a low, clear voice, "Halt and declare yourself." He would wait for the response, listening not just to the words, but to the tone, the hesitation, the direction of the voice. If the answer was slow in coming or sounded nervous, he would raise his lantern, not to illuminate himself, but to throw its beam directly onto the figure approaching. He needed to see their hands, their posture, the glint of a weapon, before they could see him clearly. This careful dance with the darkness was the only way to survive a post where friend and foe looked identical in the gloom. To coordinate across the vast emptiness of the night, the watch developed a silent language of light. From the high watchtowers, guards communicated using coded lantern signals. A single swing from left to right might mean all is well. Two quick vertical dips could signal a patrol returning. A frantic, continuous circling of the light was the universal sign for immediate danger. Rally to this position. This flickering dialogue across the rooftops was a vital nervous system for the sleeping city, a way for isolated men to feel connected and for help to be summoned without a sound. It was a system born of necessity, allowing a handful of men to effectively police a vast urban landscape enveloped in darkness. Yet for all their training and protocols, the guards were still men of their time, and the deepest fear of the night watch was often not a physical one. The witching hour, that dead time between midnight and dawn, was when the mind played its cruelest tricks. Superstition was as real as the stone they stood on. A sudden, inexplicable chill in the air was not just a change in the weather, it was a ghostly presence passing by. The cry of a fox could be mistaken for a malevolent spirit. Many guards firmly believed in restless souls, demons and creatures that stalked the darkness, and their greatest test was often holding their post against a terror that no weapon could harm. The scrape of a boot on stone was a threat you could face, but the feeling of being watched from an empty alley was a psychological battle that drained a man's courage more thoroughly than any fight. Standing alone in that immense darkness, it was not the fear of bandits that truly haunted a watchman, but the chilling possibility that the things moving in the shadows were not human at all. The constant press of bodies at the gate was a perfect hunting ground for thieves. While a guard was busy inspecting a wagon, a skilled cutpurse could slip through the crowd, his fingers as light as a feather, slicing the strings of a merchant's coin pouch and vanishing back into the throng before the victim even felt the loss. These criminals worked in teams, one creating a distraction by stumbling or starting a fake argument, while another did the stealing. The gate watch had to develop eyes in the back of their heads, learning to spot the subtle signals of a team at work, the quick pass of a purse from one hand to another, or the way a man always positioned himself behind potential targets. It was a never-ending game of wits played out in the shadow of the portcullis, where a moment's lapse in attention meant someone's livelihood was gone forever. But the more dangerous threats were the organized smuggling rings. These were not lone operators but sophisticated networks that planned their moves carefully. They might bribe a carter to build a hidden compartment beneath his load of firewood, large enough to hold bundles of untaxed wool or even forbidden weapons. They sometimes used children, sending them through the gates with seemingly innocent bundles that actually contained small, valuable items like silk or spices. The most brazen attempts involved deception at the highest level, forging the wax seals and travel documents of a noble house to move a forbidden cargo right under the guards' noses. Catching these rings required more than just sharp eyes. It demanded patience, intelligence gathering, and sometimes turning one of their own members into an informant. Yet for all the drama of catching criminals, the most emotionally draining part of a watchman's duty was dealing with the desperate. Every day, the city's prosperity drew those who had nothing, refugees fleeing war or famine, the sick begging for entry to find a healer, the destitute with no hope left. Town laws were often brutally clear: no entry for those who could not support themselves or who showed signs of plague. A guard was required to enforce these rules with a stony face, turning away a coughing mother and her children, or a starving family with hollow eyes. He had no authority to show mercy, only to follow his orders and protect the city from what his superiors saw as a threat of poverty and disease. This was the true heavy cost of their vigilance, a burden that weighed on a man long after his shift ended. How many sleepless nights were spent staring at the ceiling, haunted by the faces of those they were forced to send back into the wilderness. The most dreaded order a guard could receive was to stand the plague watch. When word spread that the Black Death was creeping toward the city, the gate watch transformed from tax collectors into grim sentinels against an invisible enemy. Their duties shifted from inspecting goods to inspecting human bodies, searching for the faintest sign of a sickness that could wipe out entire families in days. They were trained to look for specific, horrifying symptoms. A traveler with a feverish flush, stumbling with weakness, would be immediately isolated. But the true terror was the bubo, the dark, swollen lump in the groin or armpit that was the plague's unmistakable signature. A guard would use the butt of his poleaxe to motion a suspect forward, his eyes scanning for any telltale bulge beneath the clothing, any wince of pain when a limb was moved. A single cough could spell a death sentence, not just for the traveler, but for anyone nearby. Those who showed the signs were not allowed to set foot inside the city. Instead, they were directed, often at spear point, to the pest houses. These were bleak makeshift shelters erected outside the walls, places of exile where the sick were sent to die, separated from their families and the community they sought to enter. The guards who manned these outposts knew they were as likely to catch the disease as those they guarded, a knowledge that sat like a cold stone in the gut. Everything a plague victim had touched was considered contaminated. A merchant's entire wagon of valuable silks, a family's chest of heirlooms, all of it was dragged into a pit and set ablaze. The guards would stand watch over these fires, the smoke carrying the wealth of a lifetime into the sky, a necessary sacrifice to protect the thousands within the walls. The psychological toll was immense. Every day, a guard on plague watch had to harden his heart. He had to ignore the desperate pleas of a mother begging to see a doctor for her sick child, or the cries of a man separated from his wife. He enforced a brutal, necessary isolation, watching people he had turned away slowly perish just a stone's throw from safety. He would go home after his shift, strip off his clothes and wash with vinegar, praying he had not carried the death home to his own family. He was the city's living barrier, a man forced to make impossible choices in the face of a horror no one truly understood. In those terrible times, the weight of the iron key was nothing compared to the weight of that single, awful decision, repeated 100 times a day, to close the gate on hope itself. Beyond the flow of merchants and pilgrims lay a far more dangerous current of information. The gate watch served as the city's eyes and ears in a silent war of secrets, where a single whispered message could be more valuable than a chest of gold. Foreign messengers, cloaked in the colors of a distant duke or king, were their most frequent source of intrigue. These men did not wait in the common line. They were ushered to the front, greeted with a formal courtesy that masked intense scrutiny. A guard captain would take their sealed letters, his eyes noting the quality of the wax, the style of the signet ring impression, and the state of the messenger's horse and clothing. A lathered, exhausted steed suggested a frantic, urgent dispatch, while a messenger with dusty boots but a well-rested mount might have taken a slow, deliberate route, perhaps meeting with contacts along the way. Every detail was a piece of a puzzle, reported directly to the city's ruling council. The watch was also instructed to discreetly monitor the movements of their own city's powerful nobles. When a lord known for his loyalty to the crown suddenly began receiving messengers from a rival faction, the Gate Watch took note. They record the frequency of these visits, the number of armed retainers in the noble's party when he left the city, and even the direction he traveled. This was not simple gossip, it was vital intelligence. A noble traveling to his country estates with a small guard was one thing, but the same noble heading toward the borderlands with a train of armored knights was a report that would send a clerk running to the council chambers. The guards themselves became targets for manipulation. Spies posing as merchants would often linger after having their papers checked, striking up a casual conversation. They might complain about the high taxes, hoping to gauge the guards' loyalty, or offer a friendly drink while subtly probing for information about troop movements or the mood of the city. A watchman had to be a fortress of discretion, his face a blank slate, his words carefully measured. The gravest danger was a careless word. If a guard mentioned to a friendly-seeming traveler that a certain duke's envoy was expected that afternoon, that information could be sold to an assassin waiting in a nearby tavern. A loose comment about the city's grain supplies being low could encourage a besieging army to attack. The gate was a sieve, not just for people and goods, but for secrets, and the watch had to strain every one of them. Their daily duty was a constant exercise in silence, knowing that a single unguarded moment at the portcullis could unravel weeks of delicate diplomacy or plunge the entire region into war. The rigid armor of the Gate Watch concealed a deeply human world of ambition and resentment. At the very top stood the captain of the gate, a position almost always held by a minor noble or a knight's trusted lieutenant. For him, the post was a stepping stone, a chance to demonstrate administrative skill and martial discipline before moving on to a more prestigious command. He dined in the citadel, his authority absolute, his orders echoing down the stone stairwells to the men below. These men, the common guards, were the bedrock of the operation, yet they existed in a different social universe. A grizzled veteran who had fought in a dozen battles might find himself taking orders from a young captain half his age, a boy whose only qualification was his family name. This friction was the constant, low hum of life in the gatehouse, a quiet tension between earned experience and inherited privilege. This hierarchy extended beyond individuals to the gates themselves. A posting at the main gate was a coveted prize. It was the city's bustling face, a place of importance where a guard could earn commendations and be seen by powerful people. The men stationed there developed a swagger, considering themselves the elite of the watch. In contrast, a guard assigned to a small, quiet postern gate was often viewed as being in exile, a man who had either offended his captain or lacked the wit for the more complex duties of the main thoroughfare. The rivalry between these posts was palpable. A main gate guard would scoff at the easy, lonely duty of his counterpart at the water gate, while the isolated watchman would retort that at least his post required genuine vigilance, not just crowd management. This internal politics shaped every decision, from who got the worst night shifts to who was trusted with counting the day's toll collection, and that toll collection was where the social ladder met a dangerous temptation. A merchant faced with a heavy tax bill might quietly offer a guard a few silver coins to look the other way or to undervalue his cargo. For a common guardsman whose pay was often meager, such a bribe could represent months of wages. The decision in that moment was a test of character, weighed against the very real needs of a family at home. Some captains were known to turn a blind eye to this petty corruption, so long as their own share made its way up the chain, while others, fiercely honest, would hang a man caught taking a bribe as an example to the others. This shadow economy of whispers and pocketed coins was an open secret, a corrosive element that could undermine the watch's integrity from within. How did the townsfolk view the men who held their lives in their hands each day? The answer was a paradox of respect and deep-seated suspicion. On one hand, the watch was the first line of defense against invaders and the enforcer of the peace. A citizen would sleep easier knowing the gates were manned by vigilant men. They were a symbol of order, yet that very power bred mistrust. A guard could ruin a merchant's day with a hefty tax levy or destroy his life by accusing him of smuggling. Their authority to detain anyone on suspicion made people nervous. They were the necessary wall between safety and chaos, but no one likes living in the shadow of a wall, always feeling watched by the very sentries meant to protect them. The gate watchman walked a lonely path, caught between the contempt of the nobles above him and the wary eyes of the people behind him, his true loyalty known only to himself. The simmering pot on the gatehouse hearth was as vital to the watch as their weapons. Feeding a permanent garrison of men was a daily logistical puzzle, solved with a diet built for endurance, not pleasure. The common meal was a thick pottage, a stew that bubbled for days, constantly replenished with whatever was cheap and available. Dried peas or beans formed the base, thickened with coarse barley or oats and flavored with a handful of salted pork or a scrawny chicken if they were lucky. This was served with a dense, dark loaf of rye or barley bread, so hard it was often used as a trencher, a temporary plate that soaked up the stew's juices and was sometimes eaten, sometimes given to the dogs. Their constant drink was weak, small ale, a low-alcohol brew that was safer to drink than the questionable water from the city wells, providing hydration and calories without heavy intoxication. This monotonous fare was the fuel that kept them on their feet through long, cold hours of duty. Religious fasts imposed a different kind of discipline on their rations. During Lent or on Fridays, meat and dairy were forbidden. The pottage would transform into a sparse, watery broth of boiled cabbage, leeks and onions, with perhaps a handful of dried fish for protein. These lean days were a test of endurance as much as faith, the meager meals leaving a man's belly empty and his temper short, a challenge to vigilance when the body craved substance. This shared sacrifice, however, bonded the men together in a common hardship, a quiet understanding that their duty transcended even their physical needs. To supplement this Spartan diet, the watch relied on the world outside the gatehouse walls. A guard's wife or children might bring a basket from home containing a wedge of cheese, a few apples, or a meat pie, a taste of normalcy that broke the monotony. Local taverns also played a role, with guards on a break slipping into a nearby establishment for a hot meal and a stronger drink, a brief escape from their official duties. But the most unpredictable additions to their menu came from their own inspections. When a merchant's wagon was found carrying a barrel of wine that had turned to vinegar, or a wheel of cheese that was too moldy to sell, the guards often received it as a perk of the job. A confiscated side of salted beef, judged to be of poor quality and unfit for the city's market, might still be edible enough for the garrison pot. These windfalls were a small, tangible reward for their diligence, a rare moment of feasting in a life defined by fast and frugality, a reminder that the river of commerce flowing past their post could sometimes leave a strange and welcome bounty in its wake. A single sharp blast from the guard's horn meant one thing, while two short bursts meant something entirely different. This was not noise, it was a language of urgency, a code that could mobilize the entire city guard in moments. The horns were their loudest voice, reserved for clear and present dangers. One long, sustained note was the call for fire, a terror that could consume a city of wood and thatch in hours. Two short staccato blasts signaled an armed assault on the walls, sending men scrambling to the battlements with bows and boiling oil. Three quick blasts meant a riot or major civil unrest brewing in the streets, requiring a coordinated show of force to disperse the crowd before it could storm the citadel. Every guard, from the greenest recruit to the captain himself, knew these signals by heart, their bodies reacting to the sound before their minds had even fully processed the meaning. It was a system designed for instant life or death understanding. Over greater distances, a silent conversation flickered between the watchtowers. During the day, colored flags conveyed complex messages. A solid red flag might warn of a large armed party approaching from the east. A yellow flag with a black center could indicate a diplomatic envoy requiring an honor guard. The combinations were endless, a visual telegraph system that could relay information across miles of wall in a matter of minutes. At night, this duty fell to the lanterns. A guard in a distant tower would stand in an arrow slit, swinging his lantern in precise coded arcs. A single slow circle could mean all is quiet. A rapid back and forth motion signaled unknown riders approaching. The specific pattern, the number of swings, and even the height at which the lantern was held all carried specific meanings, creating a shimmering, silent network of light that kept the entire perimeter connected and alert. But within the chaotic, noisy throng at the gate itself, spoken words were often useless. Here, the watch relied on a hidden language of gestures, a discreet sign system passed from veteran to rookie. A guard questioning a merchant might casually scratch his chin with his left hand, a signal to his partner that this man's story felt rehearsed and needed deeper investigation. A watchman might simply shift his poleaxe from his right shoulder to his left, indicating to the men on the wall above that the person he was speaking to was considered a potential threat and should be watched closely. They even developed coded phrases that sounded like ordinary conversation. A guard might call out, "The rain is coming," which to anyone else was a comment on the weather, but to his fellow watchmen was an order to discreetly close the inner portcullis and prepare to seal the gate. This seamless, unspoken coordination was what transformed a group of individual guards into a single, intelligent organism, capable of reacting to a threat without ever alarming the crowd around them. In a world of constant noise and confusion, their most powerful weapon was often a silent one. The true test of the watch came not in the routine, but in the sudden shattering of it. A single cry of fire from a side street could transform the orderly gate into the heart of a storm. The first guard to spot the telltale plume of dark smoke would not wait for orders. He would slam his shoulder into the great iron winch, heaving the outer portcullis down with a deafening crash of metal on stone. At the same moment, another man would sprint up the gatehouse stairs, taking the steps 3 at a time to reach the alarm bell. The first frantic clang of that bell was a sound that froze the blood of every citizen, a single clear note of terror that cut through the market's din. Within moments, the other watchtowers would take up the call, their own bells joining in a dissonant city-wide chorus of emergency. Down in the gate passage, chaos erupted. Merchants abandoned their wagons, scrambling to drag their horses and goods back out of the closing trap. The watch worked with brutal efficiency, their poleaxes now used as barriers to shove the panicking crowd back, clearing the killing ground between the portcullises. The inner gate would then thunder down, sealing the city in two, containing the danger and preventing a stampede. Their duty instantly shifted from inspection to isolation, turning the gatehouse into an impenetrable cork in the city's bottle. For an armed band spotted on the horizon, the response was even more militarized. The flag tower would immediately run up a solid red banner, a silent scream of warning visible for miles. The horn signals would begin, two sharp, repeating blasts that sent guards on the walls, knocking arrows and tipping cauldrons of sand into the braziers to heat. The captain's focus turned outward, his eyes fixed on the approaching dust cloud, estimating numbers and intent. He had to make a critical calculation in seconds. Was this a hostile force or merely a large, well-armed merchant caravan? His decision would dictate whether they simply stood ready or began pouring the boiling sand. Inside, the watch became the city's nervous system. Runners were dispatched to the citadel to alert the Lord's knights, while other guards moved into the streets to direct the muster of the city militia. They shouted at the guild halls, ordering the butchers, the bakers, and the smiths to grab their assigned weapons and report to their defensive positions on the walls. The gate watch held the line alone during those first vital minutes, a thin armored line between a panicked city and the threat outside. Their training was measured in the speed of the portcullis drop, the clarity of the bell, and the steady hands that raised the drawbridge, buying the precious time the city needed to arm itself. In that suspended moment, with the gates sealed and the alarm echoing, every man knew the walls were not just stone, but the will of the watch holding firm against the tide. Their gaze extended far beyond the stone archway they guarded. A watchman's duty did not end at the portcullis, but stretched into the precarious world just outside the walls, a space where the city's authority was absolute, yet its protection was formally withdrawn. Each morning, a detail of guards would march out from the shadow of the gate, their first task being a slow, meticulous patrol of the cleared ground, the kill zone. This barren strip of land, kept free of all buildings and large vegetation, was a vital defensive feature, and its emptiness had to be enforced. They were looking for any sign of encroachment, a farmer's new shed built too close, or a merchant stall that had overstayed its welcome, anything that could provide cover for an approaching enemy. Their eyes scanned the earth itself, searching for the faint, unnatural lines that might betray the presence of a sapper's tunnel, a clandestine excavation aimed at undermining the very foundations of their wall. A single patch of disturbed soil, a trickle of dirt where there should be none, could reveal a plot to bring a section of the fortifications crashing down. This daily walk was a silent hunt for the city's invisible enemies. Their inspection then turned upward to the towering stone face of the wall they called home. They walked its length, their hands sometimes brushing against the cool, rough stone, feeling for cracks or damp spots that signaled crumbling mortar or water damage. They looked for loose stones that could be pried free, or for ivy that, while beautiful, could widen fissures and weaken the structure over time. They were the first line of maintenance, their reports prompting the arrival of stonemasons to make repairs. A guard's life depended on the integrity of that wall as much as on his own spear, and this ritual was a physical reaffirmation of that bond. But the most unpredictable part of their external duty was managing the lively, often lawless shantytowns that clustered like barnacles against the city's outer skin. Known as the suburbs, these were chaotic settlements of travelers who could not afford the city's inns, merchants waiting for their turn to enter, and outcasts of every kind. Here, temporary markets sprang up, selling goods that were cheaper or more questionable than those inside. A guard patrol moving through this maze of makeshift stalls and tents was a clear display of the city's reach. They broke up fights, settled disputes between rival vendors, and ensured that no permanent structures were erected. They walked a delicate line, maintaining a semblance of order without offering the full protection of the law, a constant reminder that while you could live in the shadow of the walls, you were not truly safe until you passed through the gate. Every man who took up the poleaxe did so under the weight of a sacred vow. The oath of the gate watch was not a mere formality, it was a verbal contract sworn on a holy relic, binding a man's soul to his duty. He pledged unwavering loyalty to the city and its lawful rulers, promising to defend the gates with his life, to be impartial and just in his dealings, and to remain vigilant against all threats, both seen and unseen. This oath was the bedrock of their authority, transforming an ordinary citizen into an extension of the city's sovereign will, a man empowered to detain, to tax, and if necessary, to kill in the name of public order. To break this vow was not just a failure, it was a spiritual betrayal. This profound commitment was codified into a dense, unyielding set of regulations that governed every aspect of a watchman's life. The rules were brutally specific, born from hard experience. Drunkenness on duty was a cardinal sin, punishable by immediate dismissal, a heavy fine, and a public flogging that left a man's back scarred and his reputation in ruins. A guard found sleeping at his post faced a week in the gatehouse's own cells on bread and water, a humiliating taste of the imprisonment he was meant to enforce. But the gravest crimes were those that compromised the city's security, revealing the gate's secret signals or the changing patrol passwords to an outsider was not a simple mistake, it was an act of treason. The punishment for such a betrayal was execution, often by hanging from the very walls the watchman had sworn to protect, his body left as a grim warning to his former comrades. The code even extended to a man's personal conduct, brawling while in uniform or using his position to settle a private score, brought swift demotion and a transfer to the most remote and undesirable post. The system was designed to be unforgiving because the consequences of a single man's failure could be catastrophic. A drowsy guard might miss the flicker of a spy's lantern signal. A drunk watchman could fail to lower the portcullis in time to stop a raiding party. The entire city's safety depended on the absolute reliability of every single man in the chain. This created an environment of intense peer pressure, where each guard was not only responsible for his own conduct, but was also expected to report the failings of his brothers in arms. To remain silent about another's negligence was itself a punishable offense, forcing a painful choice between camaraderie and the cold, hard letter of the law. How many men lay awake in the gatehouse chamber, listening to the breath of the man on the pallet next to them, wondering if a moment of witnessed weakness was worth a friend's ruin. This constant internal scrutiny was the invisible armor every watchman wore, a burden of conscience far heavier than any chainmail. The weight of a gate watchman's duty was mirrored in the very clothes he wore. His armor was a carefully chosen compromise, designed for long hours of mobility and endurance, rather than the singular shock of a battlefield charge. Full-plate armor, the iconic suit of the knight, was a prison of polished steel for a man who needed to bend, climb stairs, and scramble through crowds. Instead, the typical watchman relied on a brigandine, a masterpiece of practical defense. At a glance, it looked like a simple leather or cloth vest, but inside, hundreds of small, overlapping steel plates were riveted between the layers. It was flexible, relatively light, and far more affordable than a full harness, offering excellent protection against the slashing knives and desperate thrusts of a city brawler. Over this, many wore a chainmail hauberk, a long shirt of interlocking iron rings that could stop a sword tip, and was especially effective against the arrows that might be fired from the chaotic suburbs. This layered approach gave them a fighting chance in any sudden, close-quarter struggle at the gate. The most visible part of their uniform was the tabard, a sleeveless tunic worn over the armor, boldly displaying the city's coat of arms. This was not for decoration, it was a vital tool for instant recognition. In the swirling chaos of a riot or the dim light of a night patrol, a guard's silhouette had to be unmistakable. That bright, clear symbol told a panicking citizen where to run for help, and it told a fellow watchman where to rally in a fight. It was a walking banner, a constant declaration of the authority they represented, ensuring that no one ever mistook them for a common soldier or a lawless mercenary. Their head was protected by the humble, brilliant kettle helmet. Unlike the fully enclosed great helms of knights, the kettle helmet was an open-faced bowl with a wide, sloping brim. This simple design gave them unrestricted vision and hearing, two senses absolutely critical for assessing a crowd or hearing a whispered conversation. That broad brim also served as a functional umbrella, shedding rainwater away from their face and neck, and could even deflect a downward blow from a club or a stone. In the driving rain or the blistering summer sun, the kettle helmet was a guardian of comfort as much as safety. This standard kit was not static, it changed with the post and the weather. A guard stationed high on the exposed battlements might wear a thick woolen cloak over his armor. Its color often dyed to match the city's livery, providing warmth and some camouflage against the stone. In the relentless heat of a summer afternoon, the heavy brigandine might be temporarily set aside in the guard chamber, the man standing watch in his chainmail and tabard, a small concession to the suffocating reality of his duty. From the riveted plates of his vest to the city's crest on his chest, Every piece of his gear was a deliberate choice, a testament to the unique and unending demands of standing guard at the seam between safety and the unknown. The real-life vigilance of the Gate Watch was so powerful it bled into the stories people told for generations. Medieval folklore is filled with spectral sentinels, ghostly guardians said to still stand their lonely posts centuries after their deaths. In the tales told by firelight, a phantom watchman might appear on a misty night, his form shimmering as he challenges a late traveler before fading back into the stone. These stories were more than just ghost stories. They were a way for people to express the enduring spirit of protection, the idea that the city's first line of defense was so devoted, it never truly rested. The gate itself became a living character in these legends, a place where the veil between the past and present was thin, guarded by an eternal watch. Alongside these phantoms were legends of mortal men achieving the impossible. Every town seemed to have a song about a lone guard who held a gate against an entire army. In these epic poems, a single grizzled veteran, often wounded and surrounded by fallen comrades, would use his poleaxe to block the narrow passage, becoming an unbreakable dam against a human flood. He might use the gatehouse mechanisms against the invaders, dropping a portcullis to trap them in the killing ground, or pouring boiling oil through the murder holes with his last ounce of strength. These stories were the superhero tales of their day, transforming the anonymous, everyday watchman into a symbol of defiant courage. They reinforced a crucial social message that true heroism was not always found on the battlefield, but in the simple, brutal act of holding a line. This desperate hope for such a defender was woven into the very rituals the watch performed. Before a difficult night shift, a guard might touch a specific, worn stone in the gatehouse arch, a superstitious practice passed down through the ranks to ensure a quiet watch. Others carried small, personal charms, a saint's relic or a lucky river stone, tucked into a pouch beneath their brigandine. There were stories of guards who would leave a small offering of bread and ale at a crossroads near their post, a gift for the spirits of the land, asking for their eyes and ears through the long, dark hours. These small acts were a psychological armor, a way for men facing very real dangers to feel they had some influence over the unpredictable forces of fate and fortune. The medieval imagination did not see a stark line between the guard and his kettle helmet and the legendary hero holding the breach. They were two sides of the same coin, both answering the same deep human need for a sentinel in the darkness. A guard's authority stopped at the church door. The relationship between the secular watch and the all-powerful medieval church was a constant, delicate dance of competing jurisdictions. If a man accused of a crime was a cleric, even a lowly scribe or a chantry priest, the watch could not simply drag him to the gatehouse cells. They had to notify the bishop's court, a process that could take days and often resulted in the clergyman receiving a far more lenient punishment within the church's own legal system. This was a frequent source of tension, as watchmen who risked their lives to uphold the law were forced to watch known offenders shielded by a tonsure and a robe. The most dramatic collision of power was the right of sanctuary. A fugitive, blood on his hands or a stolen purse in his grip, could sprint through the streets, his only goal the carved stone arch of a church. If he managed to lay his hand on the altar or even the heavy bronze sanctuary ring on the door, he was by holy law untouchable. The pursuing guards had to halt at the threshold, their weapons useless. They could not enter, only stand watch outside for 40 days, after which the fugitive had to choose to face a trial or confess his crime and go into permanent exile. For the guards, this was a maddening spectacle, a daily reminder that a higher authority could nullify their duty with a single, desperate gesture. Their role extended to enforcing the church's temporal power through religious curfews. When the great compline bell rang, signaling the end of the day, the watch was responsible for clearing the streets, ensuring all citizens were in their homes for the night. This was not just about crime prevention, it was about enforcing a rhythm of life dictated by the cathedral's spire. They also managed the chaotic flow of faith, developing special protocols for religious processions. When a bishop or a visiting relic was carried through the city, the watch would clear the main thoroughfare hours in advance, forming a silent, respectful cordon along the route. Their most common test, however, was the endless river of pilgrims. A guard had to distinguish between a genuine, penniless pilgrim traveling to a distant shrine and a con artist using the pilgrim's robe and staff as the perfect disguise for smuggling or spying. He looked for the verifiable lead pilgrim's badge sewn onto the hat, a token from a shrine they had already visited, and listened for the authentic fervor in their telling of the journey. To mishandle a true pilgrim was a sin, but to let a spy pass under a false cloak of piety was a catastrophic failure. The gate watch stood at the crossroads of sword and cross, their daily duty a constant negotiation between the law of man and the law of God. The gatehouse was not just a fortress for the watch, but also a home for their families. Cramped living quarters were often tucked into the upper levels of the stone structure, or in small, damp cottages built directly against the outer wall. Here, a watchman's wife managed a household where the sounds of the city were a constant backdrop, and the line between duty and domestic life was paper thin. Her world was defined by the rhythms of the gate, from the morning muster call that woke her children to the evening bell that signaled her husband's return, or his continued absence on the night watch. She was the unseen anchor of the entire operation, her daily labors directly supporting the men who stood guard. A watchman's wife was a master of many trades, her work essential to the garrison's function. She and the other wives took turns tending the great gatehouse hearth, preparing the massive, simmering pot of stew that fed the men on duty. They mended torn tabards and worn-out boots, their skilled fingers repairing the uniform that represented the city's authority. Their older children became unofficial runners, carrying messages from their father at the main gate to the captain up in the citadel, or dashing to the market to fetch supplies, their intimate knowledge of the gatehouse's shortcuts making them faster than any official courier. This was a family business where every member, down to the youngest child who could carry a loaf of bread, had a role to play in the daily ritual of vigilance. Raising a family at the city's threshold came with unique perils. A sudden riot outside the gates could send a mother scrambling to bolt the family's own door, herding her children away from the narrow windows as shouts and the clash of weapons echoed from the street below. The ever-present threat of fire was a nightmare that haunted every parent living within the stone confines of the gatehouse, a structure filled with wooden floors, straw pallets, and the constant heat of the guardroom fire. Sickness was another relentless fear. The gate was the primary point of entry for every plague and pestilence, and a watchman could unknowingly carry death back to his family on his boots and cloak after a shift spent inspecting travelers. A child's cough in the night was not just a minor ailment, but a potential death sentence, a terror that made every parent's heart clench. For the children of the watch, the gatehouse was a vast, thrilling, and sometimes frightening playground. They learned to read the alarm signals before they could read words, understanding that a frantic ringing of the bell meant to run inside immediately. They played games on the stone stairs their fathers patrolled and fell asleep to the lullaby of murmured challenges and the tramp of iron-shod boots. They grew up with an innate understanding of authority, danger, and community, their lives inextricably woven into the formidable fabric of the city walls. What kind of adult did such a childhood create? A person for whom the boundary between safety and the unknown was merely the thickness of a door. The polished armor of a city guard often hid a threadbare tunic and an empty purse. His official wage when it arrived was a pittance, a few small coins doled out from the city treasury that might stretch to cover his family's bread and rent, but little else. These payments were notoriously irregular, delayed by bureaucratic inefficiency or the simple emptiness of the civic coffers after a poor harvest or an expensive war. A guard could go weeks without seeing his pay, a constant financial anxiety that gnawed at him as he stood watch over the immense wealth flowing through his gate. This gap between duty and desperation created a fertile ground for a shadow economy, where a man's integrity became a commodity he could barely afford to keep. The most common temptation was the bribe, a practice so woven into daily life it had its own subtle vocabulary. A merchant dreading the high toll on his silk might press a single silver coin into a guard's hand during the cargo inspection, a silent transaction disguised as a friendly gesture. This was the minor sweetener, the expected gratuity to ensure a swift passage and a favorable appraisal. For a guard, that coin could mean meat for his family's pot or a new pair of shoes for a child. But the corruption could scale to staggering heights. A captain overseeing the entire gate operation might strike a long-term deal with a smuggling ring, accepting a regular cut of their profits in exchange for turning a blind eye to their activities. He would orchestrate the shifts, ensuring his most trusted and complicit men were on duty when the illicit wagons rolled through. The consequences for getting caught were severe, from brutal floggings to execution for treason, yet the relentless pressure of poverty made the risk a daily calculation for many. To supplement their income, guards developed ingenious side hustles that exploited their unique position. Some offered premium services to wealthy merchants, providing unofficial security for a fee. For a few extra coins, a guard would personally escort a merchant's valuable cargo from the gate to the warehouse, his presence a clear deterrent to any thieves in the crowded streets. Others became brokers of information, selling tidbits about market conditions, the arrival of new trade goods, or the movements of rival merchants to interested parties inside the city. A guard's sharp eyes and ears were not just for the city's security, they were a source of intelligence that could be monetized. The most brazen even engaged in a form of gatehouse arbitrage, using their knowledge of toll rates to advise merchants on how to legally bundle goods to minimize their tax burden, naturally for a small consulting fee. This complex web of unofficial earnings was not just about greed, it was often about simple survival, a way to bridge the chasm between the solemn weight of their oath and the grinding reality of their poverty. How many honest men were forced to choose between their conscience and their children's hungry faces? The thunder of cannon fire signaled the end of their world. The medieval gate watch, an institution that had stood for centuries, did not fall to a single dramatic siege, but was slowly eroded by a tide of technological and political change. The first and most obvious factor was the rise of professional standing armies. Kings and city-states began to maintain permanent trained fighting forces, loyal to the crown rather than to a single city's walls. These professional soldiers rendered the local, part-time militia model of the gate watch obsolete. Why rely on a grizzled veteran and a few conscripted merchants to guard a strategic point when a company of royal troops, drilled in modern tactics, could be garrisoned there instead? The guard's deeply personal, localized knowledge was suddenly less valuable than the uniformed discipline of a state-funded soldier. At the same time, the very walls they guarded were losing their power. The development of effective gunpowder and artillery meant that no stone fortification, no matter how thick, was truly impregnable. A cannonball could smash a gatehouse to rubble in minutes, a task that would have taken sappers weeks of tunneling. The tall, majestic walls that had defined medieval defense became towering targets. Military strategy shifted from holding fixed walls to maneuvering in open fields, and the gate watch, whose entire purpose was tied to that static defense, found its role diminished. Their proud poleaxes were useless against a cannonade from 1,000 paces away. Changes in urban governance also sealed their fate. As cities grew richer and more complex, their administrations sought more control over public order. The old system, where the gate watch reported to a local captain or noble, was replaced by a centralized civic authority. This new government created early police forces, men tasked with patrolling the entire city, not just its entrance. The watch's jurisdiction shrank from the vital artery of the gate to just the gatehouse itself, and then eventually not at all. Their duties were divided among new specialists, tax collectors for the tolls, customs officers for the goods, and constables for the crime. The guard who once did it all, from profiling a liar to assessing a shipment of silk, was now a relic. The final blow was a philosophical shift in the nature of security. The medieval gate watch was fundamentally about keeping threats out. Its focus was external, a filter against the chaos of the outside world, but the modern state was increasingly concerned with controlling the population within. A standing army dealt with foreign invaders, while a police force managed internal dissent. The gate, as the primary choke point, lost its strategic monopoly. People and ideas now flowed too freely for any single institution to monitor everything at the city's edge. The centuries-old institution faded away, its members absorbed into the new armies or left to find other work, their unique blend of skills no longer in demand. The great iron keys were handed over to a new generation of custodians, and the subtle art of reading a stranger's eyes at dawn was forgotten, a lost language of safety and suspicion. The medieval gate watchman was a solitary figure who carried the weight of the entire city on his shoulders. His life was a relentless tapestry woven from countless demanding roles, each one essential to the survival of the community behind the walls. He was a soldier, his hand never far from his poleaxe, ready to face down violence at a moment's notice. He was a taxman, an appraiser of goods whose sharp eyes filled the city's coffers and funded the very walls he stood upon. He was a spy, a discreet observer of nobles and messengers, his silence guarding state secrets that could alter the fate of kingdoms. And in the countless small interactions with the desperate and the destitute, he performed the duties of a social worker, enforcing harsh laws with a heavy heart, a living barrier between order and despair. This was not a simple job, it was a complete way of life, defined by sacrifice, vigilance, and an unbreakable oath. The legacy of these men is written into our modern world in ways we rarely stop to consider. Their meticulous profiling of travelers laid the groundwork for the complex systems of border control and customs we have today. Their methodical patrols and crime logs are the direct ancestors of modern community policing and criminal databases. Even their role in public health, turning away the sick during plagues, finds its echo in our own pandemic protocols and quarantine measures. They were the first line of a complex civic defense, a human system that balanced compassion with unyielding authority. Their world has vanished, but the fundamental challenges they faced remain. We still grapple with the same questions of security, freedom, and how to protect a community without building walls around its heart. The story of the Gate Watch is a powerful reminder that safety has always depended on the courage and integrity of ordinary people in extraordinary positions. We have walked the entire length of their watch, from the cold dawn muster to the psychological toll of the plague shift. Now we turn the final corner over to you. In the comments below, tell us which part of the Gate Watch's hidden life surprised you the most. Was it their sophisticated communication systems, the heavy burden of their tax duties, or the emotional cost of turning away the sick? Or perhaps you have another medieval profession in mind, one whose secrets are just waiting to be uncovered. Share your suggestions for our next deep dive into the past.